Close your eyes, dear listener, and let the gentle currents of ancient myth carry you away. Tonight, we journey to a world where gods walked among mortals and destiny spun threads that even the mightiest could not break. We speak of Achilles, the radiant warrior whose fate was woven with both glory and sorrow from the very moment of his extraordinary birth. He was a son of prophecy, marked for greatness, yet also for a poignant end. Let us trace the quiet unfolding of his extraordinary story, a tale of choice, grief, and the eternal echo of a warrior's heart. In the shimmering depths of the Aegean Sea lived the exquisite nymph Thetis, whose beauty captivated even the gods. Yet prophecy foretold that any son she bore to a divine father would surpass his sire in power. To avert such a challenge to their celestial order, Zeus and Poseidon, with careful consideration, arranged for Thetis to wed a mortal king, a noble and virtuous man named Peleus. Their union was celebrated with a grand feast on Mount Pelion, attended by all the Olympians. It was a day of splendor, though overshadowed by the uninvited presence of Eris, the goddess of discord, who, in her spite, cast a golden apple among the guests, sparking a dispute that would in time lead to the very war Achilles was destined to fight. Peleus and Thetis, despite their different worlds, found a quiet happiness, and in due time, Thetis bore a son, a child of breathtaking beauty and unusual strength. They named him Achilles, and from his first breath, a sense of wonder and destiny surrounded him. Thetis, being an immortal goddess, deeply desired to protect her mortal son from the pains and frailties of human existence. In her boundless love, she sought to make him invulnerable, to shield him from the wounds of destiny. She took the infant Achilles to the mystical river Styx, whose dark, swirling waters were said to grant immortality to those they touched. Carefully, she dipped her son into the sacred river, holding him by his tiny heel. The chilling waters flowed over his small body, coating him with an ethereal, protective shield. Every part of him that touched the Styx became immune to harm. Every part, save for the small, vulnerable spot where his mother's thumb and forefinger had held him fast. This one small point, his heel, remained untouched by the magic of the river. An unforeseen detail, a whisper of a flaw in an otherwise perfect shield. She then took him to the sacred fires, seeking another ritual to burn away his mortality, a process Peleus, his mortal father, misunderstood, pulling the child away in alarm. Though the myth tells different versions of his early protection, the vulnerability of his heel became the enduring symbol of his singular fate. Knowing the child's extraordinary nature and the great destiny that awaited him, Peleus and Thetis entrusted young Achilles to the wise and gentle care of Chiron, the centaur. Chiron was no ordinary beast. He was a benevolent sage, skilled in healing, music, hunting, and the arts of war, a teacher to many heroes of old. High on the slopes of Mount Pelion, far from the clamor of human cities, Achilles spent his formative years. He ran wild and free through the fragrant forests, learning to track deer and wild boar, to climb the rugged peaks, and to swim in the icy mountain streams. Chiron taught him patience, reverence for nature, and the intricate ways of the lyre, filling the mountain air with sweet melodies. Under the centaur's patient tutelage, Achilles' body grew strong and agile, his mind sharp and curious. But more than physical prowess, Chiron instilled in him a sense of justice, honor, and a deep understanding of the human heart, even as Achilles' own heart swelled with an untamed spirit. Chiron also shared with Achilles the prophecies that had long surrounded his birth. He spoke of the great war that would one day engulf Troy, a war in which Achilles was destined to play a pivotal, glorious role. And then there was the choice, a heavy burden for such a young soul. A prophecy declared that Achilles had two paths before him. He could live a long life, peaceful and unremarkable, fading into obscurity with time. Or he could choose a short, glorious life, filled with unparalleled fame and heroism, but ending in an early death. This choice was not one to be made lightly, and it hung over Achilles like a shimmering, inescapable mist. As he grew, the shadow of this decision often quieted his playful spirit. He would sit by the mountain springs, listening to the murmuring water, his youthful mind grappling with the weight of such an ultimate decision. Which path would he choose? Which destiny would he embrace? Years passed, and the boy blossomed into a magnificent youth, his golden hair catching the sunlight, his eyes reflecting the clear sky of his mountain home. His prowess with spear and shield was unmatched, his swiftness legendary. He was truly a marvel, a warrior in the making. But his heart held a tenderness, a capacity for deep affection and loyalty, nurtured by Chiron's gentle guidance. Meanwhile, far across the sea, the seeds of discord sown by Eris at his parents' wedding had blossomed into full-blown crisis. Paris, a prince of Troy, had abducted Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world, from her husband Menelaus, the king of Sparta. This act ignited the rage of all Greece, and a mighty armada began to gather, destined to sail for the shores of Troy and reclaim Helen. The great kings and heroes of Greece, from wise Odysseus to mighty Agamemnon, assembled their forces. But one essential warrior was missing: Achilles. Thetis, Achilles' mother, knew the prophecy well. If her son went to Troy, he would surely die. In a desperate attempt to defy fate, she took him from Chiron's mountain and hid him on the island of Skyros. There, she disguised him as a maiden named Pyrrha and placed him among the daughters of King Lycomedes. Achilles, with his long flowing hair and youthful features, was indeed a convincing maiden, though his spirit yearned for the open air and the clang of steel. For a time he lived among the women, learning their ways, and even fell in love with Deidamia, one of the king's daughters, who bore him a son, Neoptolemus. But the great war could not begin without him. The Greek fleet was stalled, held back by adverse winds, and an oracle had declared that Troy could not fall without the aid of Achilles, the greatest warrior of his age. The clever Odysseus, renowned for his cunning, was tasked with finding him. Odysseus, accompanied by Diomedes, sailed to Scyros, knowing that Achilles was hidden there, though not his exact guise. He approached King Lycomedes, pretending to be a merchant, offering exquisite jewels, fine fabrics, and women's adornments. Among the wares, Odysseus also discreetly placed a magnificent shield and a finely crafted spear. As the king's daughters eagerly gathered to admire the treasures, trying on necklaces and admiring silks, Achilles, disguised as Pyrrha, found his gaze drawn, almost instinctively, to the weapons. His warrior's spirit stirred beneath the maiden's dress. Then Odysseus ordered a sudden, loud trumpet blast, and a simulated battle cry echoed through the palace. In an instant, the maidens scattered in fright, but Achilles, without thought or hesitation, snatched up the shield and spear, adopting a defensive stance, his true nature revealed. Odysseus smiled. He had found his man. The charade was over. Destiny, it seemed, could not be outwitted, even by a mother's loving heart. With his identity unveiled, Achilles made the difficult decision to answer the call of destiny. He bid a tender farewell to Deidamia and his young son. a quiet ache already forming in his heart for the family he would leave behind. He knew, deep down, that this departure was likely final. He joined Odysseus and Diomedes, his spirit now resolute, his purpose clear. Together, they sailed to Aulis, the gathering point for the vast Greek fleet. There, Achilles stood among the greatest heroes of his time: Agamemnon, the high king; Menelaus, the wronged husband; Ajax, the mighty; and the wise Nestor. He was a beacon among them, his presence radiating an almost divine power, a promise of victory that stirred the hearts of all who beheld him. The fleet, now complete with its most formidable warrior, finally unfurled its sails, catching the favorable winds, and set course across the shimmering Aegean for the distant shores of Troy. For 10 long years, the Greeks laid siege to the formidable city of Troy, a city protected by massive walls and defended by brave warriors like Prince Hector. The war was not a constant, roaring battle, but a grueling struggle, a cycle of skirmishes, sieges, and periods of tense stalemate. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years, blurring into a slow, weary march of time. Achilles, true to his prophecy, proved himself the most formidable warrior on either side. His swiftness and strength were legendary. He led his Myrmidons, his loyal contingent of warriors, in countless raids, conquering surrounding cities, gathering spoils, and establishing his reputation as an unstoppable force. Yet, even amidst the glory, there was a growing weariness, a sense of quiet melancholy. The constant struggle, the endless waiting, the loss of comrades, all began to weigh heavily on his soul despite his unmatched valor. Achilles' fame grew with every victory, but so too did a tension between him and Agamemnon, the proud and often arrogant commander of the Greek forces. The cause of this friction was Briseis, a beautiful maiden Achilles had captured as a prize of war. She had become dear to him, a source of comfort amidst the harsh realities of battle. However, after Agamemnon was forced to return his own captive, Chryseis, to her father to appease Apollo, he demanded Briseis from Achilles as compensation, a blatant act of disrespect and a challenge to Achilles' honor. The unjust demand ignited a furious quarrel between the two leaders, a bitter exchange that would have profound and tragic consequences for the entire Greek army. Achilles, his pride deeply wounded, felt betrayed and dishonored. His sense of justice was outraged. In a fit of righteous fury and indignation, Achilles declared that he would no longer fight for Agamemnon or the Achaeans. He withdrew himself and his loyal Myrmidons from the battlefield, retreating to his ships, which were beached on the distant shore. He vowed to stand by and watch until the Greeks, suffering terrible defeats, begged him to return. His mother, Thetis, seeing her son's anguish, ascended to Olympus and pleaded with Zeus to honor Achilles by allowing the Trojans to gain the upper hand. Zeus, bound by his promise, agreed. And so the tide of war began to turn dramatically against the Greeks. Without Achilles, their greatest champion, their spirit faltered, and their lines began to crumble under the relentless assaults of the Trojans, led by the brave Hector. The sound of Trojan triumphs echoed across the plains, bringing despair to the Greek camp. Yet Achilles remained steadfast in his anger, watching from afar, his heart heavy but unyielding. Among all the Greeks, one person held a uniquely cherished place in Achilles' heart: Patroclus, his dearest companion since childhood. Patroclus was not just a friend, he was a confidant, a brother in all but blood, a gentle soul who understood Achilles' complex nature. As the Greeks suffered devastating losses, as their ships were threatened with fire, Patroclus's heart ached for their suffering. He saw the wounded, the dying, the growing desperation in the camp, and he could no longer bear to stand idly by. He approached Achilles, his eyes filled with sorrow and a desperate plea. He begged Achilles to put aside his wrath, even if only for a short time, to come to the aid of their comrades. But Achilles remained unyielding, his anger at Agamemnon still burning fiercely. Yet he saw the pain in Patroclus's eyes, and a compromise, a small concession, began to form in his mind. Unable to sway Achilles to return to battle himself, Patroclus made a desperate request. If Achilles would not fight, could he at least lend Patroclus his famous armor? His magnificent, gleaming armor, forged by Hephaestus himself, was recognizable to all on both sides of the war. Patroclus believed that by wearing it, he could strike fear into the hearts of the Trojans, rally the faltering Greek forces, and perhaps even turn the tide. Achilles, after a moment of deep thought, agreed, but with a solemn warning. Patroclus was to drive the Trojans back from the ships, but no further. He was not to pursue them to the city walls, for Achilles feared for his beloved friend's safety, knowing the power of fate. Patroclus, his heart swelling with hope, donned the resplendent armor, and with a fervent prayer rode out to meet the enemy. His appearance indeed created a surge of hope among the Greeks and confusion among the Trojans, who believed Achilles himself had returned. The sight of Achilles' armor, even on another man, invigorated the Greek forces. Patroclus, inspired by the urgency of the moment, fought with incredible valor, driving the Trojans back, saving the ships from burning, and pushing the enemy from the Greek encampment. He was a whirlwind of fury and courage, exceeding Achilles' cautious instructions, carried away by the heat of battle and the exhilaration of success. He pursued the retreating Trojans all the way to the very gates of Troy, forgetting Achilles' warning in his heroic fervor. His courage was undeniable, but his recklessness, born of his compassion, sealed his tragic fate. The gods themselves watched with a mixture of admiration and pity, knowing the path he was now on. He was magnificent, truly, a hero in his own right, but he was not the immortal protected Achilles. As Patroclus fought bravely near the walls of Troy, his divine protection was not the same as Achilles. Apollo, the sun god, still favoring the Trojans, intervened, striking Patroclus with a stunning blow, loosening his helmet and weakening his spirit. Then Euphorbus, a Trojan warrior, wounded him. Finally, the mighty Hector, champion of Troy, seized the opportunity. With a fatal thrust of his spear, Hector struck down Patroclus. As Patroclus lay dying, Hector stripped him of Achilles' glorious armor, claiming it as a spoil of war. The news reached Achilles swiftly, carried by the mournful cries of the returning Greek warriors. When Achilles heard of Patroclus's death, a profound, soul-shattering grief consumed him. He let out a terrible cry, a sound that echoed across the plains, tearing through the very fabric of the battlefield. All his rage at Agamemnon, all his pride, vanished in an instant, replaced by an overwhelming, agonizing sorrow. Achilles tore at his hair, covered his face with dust, and wailed with a grief so immense it touched the heavens. His mother, Thetis, hearing his cries from the depths of the sea, rose to comfort him, her own heart breaking at her son's anguish. But Achilles was beyond comfort. His sorrow transmuted into an incandescent rage, a thirst for vengeance that overshadowed all else. He vowed to avenge Patroclus, no matter the cost, no matter his own fate. He declared that he would not rest, he would not eat, he would not sleep, until he had faced Hector in battle and paid him back for the death of his beloved friend. His spirit, once tempered by Chiron's wisdom, was now a roaring fire, fueled by loss and an unbearable pain. He was no longer thinking of his own life, but only of retribution. Since Hector had taken Achilles' armor from the fallen Patroclus, Thetis, with a mother's fierce love, once again ascended to Olympus. She pleaded with Hephaestus, the divine smith, to forge new armor for her son, armor even more magnificent and powerful than the last. Hephaestus, moved by her plea, created a masterpiece. A shield depicting the entire cosmos, a helmet shining like a star, and a breastplate of unparalleled strength. This new armor was not just protective, it was a symbol of Achilles' renewed, terrifying purpose. Donning the radiant, God-forged armor, Achilles strode onto the battlefield, a terrifying vision of golden fury. His presence alone sent shivers of dread through the Trojan ranks. His grief had transformed him, making him swifter, stronger, and more relentless than ever before. He was an unstoppable force, a whirlwind of death, seeking only one man: Hector. The Trojans scattered before him, but Hector, knowing his destiny and the defense of his city rested upon his shoulders, bravely awaited Achilles. Though his family begged him to stay within the city walls, Hector chose to face the inevitable. The two greatest warriors of their age met on the plains before Troy's gates. It was a duel of epic proportions, a clash of destinies. Hector, though valiant and strong, was ultimately no match for Achilles, who fought with the divine fury of a man possessed by grief and vengeance. After a fierce and brutal struggle, Achilles, with a precise and deadly thrust, struck Hector down. He had avenged Patroclus. But in his blinding rage, Achilles committed an act that shocked even the gods. He tied Hector's body to his chariot and dragged it mercilessly around the walls of Troy, desecrating the fallen hero's remains. A terrible display of vengeance and disrespect. This act, born of profound grief, marred his glorious victory. Night after night, Achilles continued his gruesome ritual, dragging Hector's body, his heart still heavy with sorrow, unable to find peace. The gods, observing from Olympus, were deeply disturbed by his dishonorable treatment of the noble Trojan hero. Zeus sent Iris, the messenger goddess, to advise Priam, the aged king of Troy and father of Hector, to go to Achilles and beg for his son's body. Guided by Hermes, Priam, alone and vulnerable, slipped into the Greek camp and into Achilles' tent. The old king knelt before the slayer of his son, a profound humility in his eyes, and kissed Achilles' hands, the hands that had taken his son's life. He pleaded with Achilles, speaking of his own father, Peleus, and the grief he must one day face. This simple, human plea, from a grieving father to a grieving son, finally broke through Achilles' hardened heart. Achilles looked at the aged king, his enemy, and saw not just the father of Hector, but a reflection of his own beloved father, Peleus. He remembered the love he had for Patroclus and understood deeply the king's pain. Tears flowed freely from both men, tears of shared humanity, of loss, and of a quiet understanding. Achilles raised Priam, offered him food, and granted his request. He personally prepared Hector's body for burial, treating it with respect and honor. He also agreed to a temporary truce, allowing the Trojans time to mourn and bury their champion. In that moment, the fierce warrior, the demigod, showed a profound compassion, proving that even in the midst of war and vengeance, the human heart could find solace and empathy. It was a rare, beautiful moment of peace in the brutal tapestry of war. With Hector's funeral complete and the truce ended, Achilles returned to battle, knowing in his heart that his own end was near. The prophecy of his short, glorious life had been fulfilled with Patroclus's death and Hector's demise. He fought with an almost reckless abandon, no longer fearing death, for his greatest sorrow had already been experienced. He knew his destiny was unfolding as foretold, a path leading inevitably to glory and to the grave. Though the precise details of his death vary in myth, the most enduring version tells of his encounter with Paris, Hector's brother, who, with the guidance of Apollo, shot a poisoned arrow. This arrow, guided by a god, found the one vulnerable spot on Achilles' body, the very heel by which his mother had held him when she dipped him in the Styx. It was a wound that, despite his divine strength, proved fatal. The great Achilles, the radiant warrior, the finest of the Achaeans, fell. His death was a profound blow to the Greek army, a moment of profound sadness and despair. His body was recovered by the valiant efforts of Ajax and Odysseus, and a grand funeral was held, attended by all the gods and goddesses, honoring his extraordinary life and his unparalleled heroism. His armor, the magnificent set forged by Hephaestus, became a subject of dispute among the surviving Greek heroes, a symbol of his enduring legacy. Achilles' story, though ending in sorrow, became an immortal legend, a testament to the power of choice, the depth of grief, and the relentless pull of destiny. He chose glory, knowing it would be fleeting, and in that choice, he secured his place among the immortal heroes of myth, his name whispered through the ages. Achilles, the warrior of destiny, remains a figure of immense power and complexity. He was a man of contrasts, fierce in battle, yet capable of deep tenderness, driven by pride, yet softened by empathy, a demigod bound by mortal fate. His tale reminds us that even the greatest heroes are touched by human emotion, by love and loss, and by the difficult choices that shape their lives. His legend is not just about strength, but about the profound weight of destiny, the price of glory, and the enduring power of friendship. It is a story that echoes through the quiet corridors of time, inviting us to reflect on our own paths and the destinies we forge. And with that, dear listener, our journey with Achilles comes to a gentle close. May his story inspire a sense of peace as you drift off to slumber. Good night, and remember to subscribe to MythOwl for more calming tales from ancient worlds. Sweet dreams.